today we're talking about properties of rectangles, and we first need to have our definition of the property of a rectangle, which is that the rectangle is defined as a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Okay? So that basically means that all the properties that we talked about a parallelogram, about both sides are congruent, the lines are parallel, the diagonals bisect each other, those all are going to still stay apart. But now we're just adding the 4 right angles. So let's talk about the property of the sides. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, just like your parallelogram, which makes FH parallel to EI, and FE is going to be parallel to HI. We also have that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent, so that makes FH congruent to EI and FE congruent to HI. Those there, okay? Because those are your properties of a parallelogram. Okay, so those follow through as well. Okay? Now, let's talk about the properties of the angles. Okay? Both pair of opposite angles are congruent, just like our parallelogram. So that would make angle F congruent to angle I. Angle E is going to be congruent to angle H. Your consecutive angles are supplementary, just like our parallelogram. So angle E plus angle I is going to be 180. Angle I plus angle H is equal 180. Angle H plus angle F is equal to 180. And angle F plus angle E is going to be equal to 180. All right? Those two properties of parallelogram. Okay? 4 right angles. So the measure of angle E is going to be the same as the measure of angle F, which is equal to the measure of angle H, which is equal to the measure of angle I. And they all are equal to 90. Okay? That is a big one that makes it stand apart from your parallelogram. Okay, so now talk about our diagonals. Okay, the diagonals bisect each other. Where else have we heard that one? Well, that would be the parallelogram. So FG is congruent to GI, and EG is going to be congruent to GH. Okay, that's a property of a parallelogram. And the only thing different is now my diagonals are congruent. So FI, the whole thing, is going to be congruent to EH. Okay? So those two things, that diagonals are congruent and that it has 4 right angles, those are the 2 things that make it special, that we can say, hey, it's a rectangle, because of the 2 special things that make a rectangle are 4 right angles and diagonals are congruent. Those are the 2 things that separate it from a parallelogram. Okay? I need to remember those. All right, so let's look at a few examples that we can do with all these properties. So PRST is a rectangle. Find each angle if the measure of angle 1 is 50. So let's just work all our way around. Well, it has to be a right angle, so 1 and 2 have to equal 90, so 2 has to be 40. Since diagonal, this is parallel lines, and I have a diagonal, that makes 5 an alternate interior at 40. And so since 5 and 6 are 180 degrees, that makes 6 has to be, or I'm sorry, 50, 40. The total angle has to equal 180, but that one's going to make this 50. So then that makes, if my diagonals bisect and the diagonals are congruent, that makes, if this is 50 and this is 40, and that's 7 and that's 7, that's going to make this one 40 because the sides are the same, which makes that 50, which then makes this one 40 because they're alternate interior. That makes that 50. And then since this is 40 and 40 are 80, and my triangle is 180, that's going to make this 100, which then makes this 180 because they're going to give you supplementary or a linear pair. And then that makes this one 80 because of linear, or you could say because of vertical angles, all sorts of different ways to go about that one. All right, so 2 was then 40, 4 was 40, all right, did I do that? I'm trying to match up my, yeah. Well, we don't necessarily fill in, we did. Okay, let's go down to finding the variables. I know that this side is congruent to this side, so I can set them equal to each other. And so when I subtract 6x, I get x. When I add 4, I get 8, so x is equal to 8. And since I know that these two angles are equal to 90, I can set the two of them equal to 90. And so I have 8x plus 10 is equal to 90. So that gives me 8x is equal to 80. And so x is equal to 10. All right, PS is the diagonal. RT is that diagonal. I know that they're congruent, so I can set them equal to each other. And so subtract 6x to give me x, add 2, so x is equal to 5. All right, another property is that from the parallelogram is my diagonals bisect each other, which means they're congruent. So I can just say 2x minus 4 is equal to 36. So 2x is going to be equal to 40. So x is equal to 20.